For all the folks that are on our Lunch and Learn webinar number 2, Acumatica versus GP, I wanted to say thank you for being here today. Today's focus is going to be really geared towards the financial module itself and a little bit of banking, but we're really going to focus on general ledger, chart of accounts, journal entries. We will touch on import scenarios because that is really an amazing, powerful feature of Acumatica, and the fact that it's built into the core application where we can bring journal entries in from almost any source or AP transactions, almost any transaction. With Great Plains, you actually have to buy the customization module to get that capability. We are going to touch a little bit on import scenarios. The financial report writer, again, very much similar to FRX. We all know FRX, and then of course Microsoft came out with Management Reporter, which they stopped developing on literally 2012. So think about that. That's almost 8 to 9 years ago. And they still didn't have all the features in Management Reporter that were in the original FRX tool that it replaced. Acumatica took an entirely different approach. Even though the rows, columns, the formatting of the reports in the financial report writer in Acumatica are almost very, very similar to FRX. The interesting thing that they did with it was they built it into the same platform, the user interface. So that's, again, another big, for lack of a better word, advantage of the Acumatica platform. They were able to use the same user interface. So your screens that you see on journal entries and things like that are going to be exactly the same. I know I'm going to be excited to have Stacey show that to you. And it's very fast, I know, because I use it every day. I wouldn't say every day, but I do run it. I do run Acumatica every day because Cal switched over about 4 years ago. And then we'll talk a little bit about bank feeds and then centralizing, the banking, module, which again, a lot of the Acumatica features when it comes to banking are superior to, the GP functionality also. So that being said, I am going to go through the slides for Acumatica that I went through in the first presentation, but we're not going to necessarily spend as much time on these. I'm actually going to go through them very quickly, so that if you're new to this, Lunch and Learn Series 2, and you were on the first one, I'm not going to spend as much time on them. So we are going to send out recordings of the Lunch and Learn number 1 to every attendee, including the people that are new to this session, number 2, and we'll go from there. So again, the agenda is the same, 12 to 1:30, questions on the end, and let's get started. So again, digital transformation. Most core ERP systems on the market today are still analog and maybe client server. There's very few that have made the transition to machine learning, MI, or ML, and artificial intelligence, and the ability for the core platform to do things like OCR and things of that nature. Acumatica, being that it was written much later than almost all the other cloud platforms, has that built in. We talked about the fact that Acumatica has lots of additions, field service, commerce, construction, distribution, manufacturing. It literally has, all of those available. And again, we focus on this middle tier, Acumatica XRP platform. That's the tier that can handle the document management, the mobile framework, the workflows, and the dashboard creations that we see that, again, many other applications require outside applications to be able to do. The ability to customize the platform. We also talked real quick about the databases, SQL, Microsoft SQL Server or MySQL. We talked a lot about the fact that Acumatica runs in the AWS cloud, but can easily run in an Azure platform if we need to. And then the development tools. And again, on the top there, we've got all of the additions, which again, we covered in the first session, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. 9,500 customers worldwide. Pretty amazing story. As far as, when we talk about a pure born in the cloud solution like Acumatica, well, all these other cloud-based platforms can communicate with Acumatica in a much more efficient way, a much more cost-effective way. So if you need to bring things in or talk to some other product, it's more of a plug and play as opposed to a custom interface. And as we know, whenever you say the word custom, it means extra dollars. So all of that is a really important feature. When you go to SaaS, your security, you have the benefit of the fact that you're not controlling that environment, that cloud where your software is running as much. So somebody like AOS, someone as like AWS, which is a very, very large government contractor, you get the benefit of security of your data without having to worry as much. Cal just recently had to replace their firewall because there was a problem and the firewall couldn't do some of the things that we needed to do to protect our data. So we had to replace our own, our firewall. You don't have to worry about that with SaaS. Your data is secure. We've had, I think I mentioned, 3 or 4 clients of Cal that had servers, which, we don't maintain the servers, they do. They had, a couple of ransomware. So again, all that goes away with SaaS. We talked about AWS and public versus private clouds. Acumatica with their AWS is a public cloud, but to a certain extent, there's a lot more flexibility with the Acumatica platform in able to do things on your time frame, where some of the other offerings with cloud, to be honest with you, they're more public than private. So you can't do as many things because again, you don't have as much control over your individual environment. You're running, when you go to the cloud, you're obviously sharing resources in some way. So, modern friendly growth. I mean, we can get into that. We don't get into a lot of details with this, but Acumatica's growth is not based on a per user cost. GP, it's so much per user. You add another user, you pay for that user, and you pay for forever, and you pay for an enhancement on it. Acumatica, you kind of pay for a resource or a platform, except for the small business edition. I have to be careful in terms of how I present it. The small business edition comes in a 5 and a 10 user version, and those are only that SBE small business edition is the only one that's user based. Once you move to a resource-based model, you can have as many users as that resource level will support. So you don't get nickel and dime every time you want a user, or if you want to open that up to somebody that might only be in there for 5 minutes a week, you don't have to worry about that and pay for that user and wonder whether they're using it every week. The platform will support as many users as that resource level will do. Data ownership, we talked about that last time in more detail. It just basically means that at any time, even if you're running in the SaaS, in the cloud, you can take a copy of your data, not just your data, but your environment, your setup, and you can move that to a local PC running either MySQL or Microsoft's free SQL Server version, and you can restore your entire database once you put that same version on that PC environment. And it's a 2-user version, so it's not something you can run your whole company on, but the fact that you can get to your SQL underlying data in a local environment, on a server or even a laptop, is pretty amazing. You can't do that with all the other products out there. Free training. Acumatica has an open university. So, I mean, again, your people can get on and they can take the same courses that our consultants earn to get their badges. You can look at that university at any time because it's open to everybody, even college students, things of that nature. We talked a lot about the responsive design in the first session because it was involved in talking about the user interface. I'll just touch on that, and that is that Acumatica was born in a period of time where every website had to start thinking about being able to be presented on a phone or a tablet. So it makes the core Acumatica application different than all these other applications. Many of them, all of them have mobile platforms, and yeah, they can run on a browser. But when you shrink down the screen to a smaller device, the core, screens don't change because you can't. So they have mobile platforms, so you can look at your information in mobile platforms, but it's a different platform. We'll show you today on even on some of the screens today, how, again, that mobile, responsive design works. And then the fact that, that Acumatica's platform is compatible, even with, approvals on a watch, or, Alexa and Siri, being able to, have almost a voice interface. Again, not any of the other, platforms out there have the ability to do that without being kind of more of an add-on. So really, in just summary, real quick, Acumatica built on the latest technology. Unlike products like NetSuite or Intact, which are actually 10 and 15 years older than Acumatica. Anywhere, any device, any size, responsive design, unlimited users, the ability and flexibility of choice. You can run it in private cloud, SaaS, or you can even purchase the software and run it on your own environment. Seamless integration to Microsoft and to Outlook, the Power BI, all that's built in. Dashboards, which Stacey will be showing you some financial dashboards today. I think we focused on the AP one last time. Maybe we'll be taking a look at a different one this time. And again, access to your data, and truly your data. I mean, that's just, you're not getting your data back in a comma delimited, spreadsheet or in a tab file. I mean, you can literally get at your SQL data. It's your data. You should be able to get it at it in a related database fashion. We talked just about this last time real quick. I mean, for our GP customers during this particular promo and this Lunch and Learn series, by the end of November, Acumatica is offering a 33% discount locked in for 3 full years. Again, I mean, I've been selling Acumatica for 4 years, and the normal promotion is 5 or 10% per month. And sometimes they lock it in for 3 years, but 33% for this many years, unheard of. But again, they're passing that on to the Cal customer base. There are some smaller discounts possible, but we have to get approval on Small Business Edition, but nothing compared to the 33 because it's already discounted. Cal has developed a conversion tool. We have a conversion tool. We actually just had one of our GP customers sign on, and we used a conversion tool to convert their GP databases. Now, again, this is master files, general ledger history, vendors, customers, OpenAR, OpenAP. It does not convert historical. It's very difficult to convert one historical data ERP system to another. This makes it easier for us and less costly for us to convert you from GP to Acumatica. I wish we had it when we did it. We did it all by hand at Cal 4 years ago. And last but not least, again, Cal has been running on the Acumatica platform for 4 years. I think I mentioned that it was probably the best thing that I could have done for the business. I love GP. I ran it for 22 years, but I was amazed at how much more we can do, how much more we can be connected with our customers, at levels that we can never even think about it, with the GP platform. So I can only say that, I mean, we've been working with it, and I've, as a business owner, truly enjoyed the journey, and the day-to-day experience right now with Acumatica. That being said, let's see Acumatica in action. I'm going to turn this over to Stacey, who is going to be your guide for the rest of the Lunch and Learn.
Thanks, George. Last week, in our Lunch and Learn, first Lunch and Learn series, we took you through just a general overview of Acumatica, We took you through the navigation and a lot of the general system, global inquiries and areas of the system. When I was doing that, I was acting kind of as an AP clerk, the information that we were looking at. Today, we're shifting gears a little bit. Since we're going to be focusing on the general ledger and banking this afternoon, I kind of changed my role and I transformed into more of a controllership type position, which is why you are seeing this controller dashboard here set as my homepage today. This is another Acumatica out-of-the-box dashboard that is available to you when you purchase Acumatica. Under the controller dashboard, it's giving you a very good overview of what's going on throughout all the modules here within your organization. It's giving you a little taste of what's happening in AR, in AP, over in your sales module, some banking, your purchasing module, some different widgets kind of displaying again, AR, banking, and some financial information when it comes to expenses here and your income through these different graphs that we're seeing. So just like the accounts payable dashboard that we saw, the controller dashboard is going to also allow you to drill into any one of these widgets, regardless of what type the widget is. If I wanted to just kind of see all my open AR that's making up that 5.3 million, I can just click into that. And here I am sitting at a generic inquiry that's giving me a list of all of my customers and what their balances are, broken up into current and overdue. So again, here in the controller dashboard, we're really seeing that same functionality that we saw last week in our AP clerk dashboard. I want to start out today on the financial side, kind of diving into Acumatica's chart of accounts and talking about how the structure is different than the approach that Dynamics GP takes. So I'm going to come up here to my universal search and I'm going to type in chart of, and it's starting to filter, and you'll notice here it's giving me the form that contains that word chart, which happens to be my chart of accounts. So you'll notice in the chart of accounts here that the number of accounts that we're seeing here is actually much, much less than what you would typically see in GP's chart of account listing. Okay. The reason for that is in Acumatica, your chart of accounts consists of only your natural account number. In the GP world, your chart of accounts consists of both your natural or your main account number, plus every possible combination of sub-accounts that you may use, all concatenated together into one string. Okay. Now, in taking that approach where you're combining your account number with kind of your sub-accounts, it causes your chart of accounts to grow into the thousands. I actually had some GP clients years ago where their chart of accounts actually exceeded 50,000 accounts because of all the different combinations that we needed to create for their different sub-accounts that they had. So that becomes a maintenance, just I think a monster for maintenance, just maintaining your chart of accounts. Any changes that you may make to one, you might have to make to many, to several. Also from a financial reporting perspective, when you're talking about management reporter, again, you have all these accounts to take into consideration. Again, just creates huge, huge maintenance for individuals in the organization. So here again, this is your chart of accounts where you're laying out your main account number. The length of the main account number, it can range, you know, typically people have at least 4 characters. It could go up to 30 characters if you wanted it to. And we usually see people sticking with that 4 or 5. The account class, this kind of translates in the GP world to that account category area there where it kind of defines not just that the cash or that the account is a, you know, an asset or a liability, expense or revenue, kind of gives that subclassification of what the category is of that account. Okay. So because we just have our natural account here, there's actually another screen inside of Acumatica called sub-accounts. The sub-accounts is where the additional information, part of your typical GP account string, this is where this is going to reside. Now in this sales demo environment, we're using a two-segmented sub-account structure. So just like GP, right, you can create segmentations in your sub-accounts to represent different areas of your business in which you want to be able to report on or inquire on. So there's lots of inquiries where you can look at a particular sub-account or a value within that sub-account string. Same thing in your financial reports that we'll be looking at in a little bit. You'll be able to create a tree, or Acumatica calls it a unit set, where you'll be able to slice and dice your financial reports by the different values in each of these segments here in your sub-account string. So again, Acumatica splits out the account from the sub-accounts so that they're two separate fields, creating a lot less maintenance over on your chart of accounts. All right, so we are going to jump over into a journal entry where you're going to kind of get a flavor of what this looks like, having your account and your sub-account separated into two separate fields. So over here in my financial workspace, under my transaction menu, I'm going to open up my journal transaction screen. Now, when I click that screen, that menu item, it does bring me to the journal entry inquiry. So again, this is kind of an equivalent to your smart list where you're seeing all your journal entries in GP today. Now, I can look for entries if I need to before I go ahead and create one, or I can just hit the plus button. Okay? If I want to bypass having to come into the inquiry first and then hitting the plus button, again, over my financial workspace, I have this tile here that will bring me directly to the journal transaction form. So if I click that, I'm bypassing my inquiry and going directly to the screen. All right. So here I'm going to kind of demonstrate just putting in a quick journal entry here. We have our transaction date and our posting period. The branch that rolls into this transaction, if you are in a multi-company or multi-branch environment, is the branch that I am currently logged into or I have set as my default. In Acumatica, you can have multiple ledgers. Okay, ledgers, examples of ledgers that you would create in Acumatica is your actual ledger. That's really your posting ledger. You can have budget ledgers and you can have statistical ledgers. And there's actually a fourth ledger that can be used if you have Acumatica tenants where you have different functional currencies. So you need to have separate Acumatica tenants. When you want to do consolidated reporting, you can take all those entries from a company that's in a different functional currency, and there's a translation process that will move all of those entries up into your consolidation company into a consolidation ledger, where you'll then be able to include those balances in your financial reports. So they'll already be converted right to whatever the currency is that you do your reporting in here. So those are some different ledgers. Typically, for the most part, you'll just be posting to your actual ledger here. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to just put a description, and I'm just going to say this is a rent accrual. So what I'm going to demonstrate to you is the flexibility that Acumatica offers to allow users to quickly get entries into the system. There's several different ways that you can go about this, and I'm going to kind of give you a flavor of each of those. Now, what I'm going to be showing you today here in this journal transaction screen carries over into your payables if you're putting in a bill, or if you were doing a receivables invoice. These different methods that I'm going to illustrate for getting this transaction into the system, again, is available throughout the system. So the first example that I'm going to show you here is I'm just actually going to manually key in the entry. So I'm going to go and I'm going to look up my rent account. Now, you'll notice here, I don't need to type in the account number. I don't have to memorize my account numbers. I can just start typing a portion of whatever that account name or description is, and you can see how Acumatica is giving me a filtered list based on what it's finding. So I'm going to come on over here and I'm going to pick my rent and lease expense account. Now for my sub account here, this is where we have that secondary field or that separate field that you wouldn't typically see in GP, where you're now going to go and you're going to define what sub account you want to associate with this transaction. Now, if you have any accounts in Acumatica where you would never use a sub account, an example that is typically your balance sheet accounts. You're typically not distributing your expenses or your entries down to a sub-account level, right, when you're dealing with balance sheet accounts in most cases. So to help speed up your data entry, we can configure Acumatica so that it's smart enough to know that when there's a certain account that you typically don't have a sub-account, it could actually default all zeros for you. So there's no data entry required. Okay. Under this example, I do want to go ahead and I want to populate a sub-account. If I want to know what the values are, I can hit F3, and it's going to show me all the values that I could possibly assign here in this field. So this first segment that we're looking at in the sub-account is actually represents the product line here for this demo company. So for rent expense, I am not going to book anything to a specific product line. I'm going to just pick my zeros. I'm going to hit F3 again. And here's where it's showing me all the different values of my second sub-account, which happens to represent the different departments within my organization. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pick finance, and I'm going to indicate how much rent I want to accrue to my finance department. So I'm going to go in and pop in $500. I'm going to hit my down arrow just to start a new line, and I'm going to continue. I'm going to do 6,900, and this time I'm going to book this to, let me just put my cursor in that. I guess I could have kept it there. I'm just going to hit F3, and I'm going to go to support and operations and book $300 there. And then I will finish this up with one of my purchase accrual accounts here. I thought that was one of them. Let me just type in the word accrual. And I'll just expense accrual here. And I'm just going to go to all zeros because at a balance sheet level, I'm not booking to any sub-accounts. Okay. So here's how you can see how you use that account and those sub-account fields, again, separate fields, but you use that kind of to achieve the same goal as you are today in GP, where you're having to build out all those account strings that you may use here, where in Acumatica, you can kind of mix and match your account with any sub-account values, and that doesn't need to be kind of predefined like it is inside of GP today. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, I am in a balanced state, meaning if I want to make changes to this entry, I still have the ability to do so because I have not yet released, which is the same, has the same effect as a post inside of GP. Because I have not released, I can still go ahead and I can make edits to this transaction. Now, Acumatica does not have batching. You probably noticed there was no batch field as I was going through this. There is no batch function. Now, Acumatica does have some great edit list reports, and I'm going to hit my show all to see everything. And I'm going to run my GL edit detail. Now, when you run these edit lists so that you can kind of preview the entries that you're working on, you do have this created by field that you could use to kind of filter out all those entries perhaps that you created that you typically would put in a GL batch. Right? I'm going to keep that wide open and just run this. So here's where you can go and you can see all of your entries that are currently balanced and not yet released. So if they need some sort of review, you can go ahead and do that before releasing. Now, on these edit reports, as well as almost every other report that you're going to run in Acumatica, you will find some sort of hyperlink that will bring you to the transaction, or if this is a subledger transaction, it could bring you to the customer or the vendor, so that you don't have to leave this screen to get more information, right, about the data that you're looking at. So it's simply just as quick as just clicking that, and now I'm here, I have my entry open. If I needed to make any changes to this, I could certainly do so. Okay. When it comes to going ahead and releasing your transactions, you have a couple options here. You could certainly go back to your transaction, or maybe you never left it. Maybe it was just a one-off. You didn't really need to run an edit list. You could certainly come up here and you could release this one entry. Acumatica also has a processing screens that will allow you to release all balanced entries all at the same time. So this would show you all your entries with that status of balance, and you could say release all, and that would finalize your transaction. Now, I could take this a step further, and I could actually automate this process so that maybe at the end of the day, any transactions that are hanging out here balanced, I can actually set up a schedule so that this schedule can run on whatever frequency I define here. So under the scenario we're talking about right now, we could set it up to run daily, and perhaps it, we have it set up so that it starts at, 6 or 7 in the evening when everyone's done working for the day. And what this schedule will do is it will automatically go ahead and release any transactions that are balanced and sitting here in the queue so that users don't need to take any action on that. Now, if for some reason you're working on a transaction and you want to make sure it doesn't get released, especially if you have that automation in place, I'm going to go back to my entry here that I just created. And you do have the ability under the action menu to go ahead and put that on hold. Okay? So when a transaction is on hold, you'll notice you don't see that release button. You can't release a hold transaction. You would have to remove the hold and put it on balanced. Same thing. Let me go ahead and save this. Same thing in this mass processing screen. Any transactions on hold, right, get filtered out and will not get released. So that's a way that you can kind of control those entries that you haven't yet finalized. You want to make sure it doesn't get automatically released through a schedule or a user that has security rights to do so. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to go into that transaction that I created. I'm going to go ahead and release that. I'm going to remove the hold and release, and now that's been finalized. So just like GP, right? Acumatica is a gap compliant system. I can't go into this entry. I'm double clicking, which opened up that screen. I can't go into any of these dollar amount fields, right? And I can't edit this at this point. I can reverse or reclass, which I'm going to show you some reclassifications in a little bit, but you would need to either take one of those actions, a reverse or a reclass, if you need to make changes or if you wanted to kind of void this entry. All right, so this was the manual way of putting in an entry. Now I'm going to move a little quicker and show you a few other ways where you could kind of get the same entry into the system without having to manually key that in. So next thing I want to show you the copy function. So if I go up here to my clipboard and I hit copy and I hit paste, this is going to allow me to basically to replicate that same transaction very quickly. So if you have, let's say, depreciation, maybe you're not using a fixed asset module, you've got a depreciation schedule that your CPA firm provided to you, and it's pretty much the same month after month after month. You could call up that previous depreciation issue, copy it like I did, start a new entry, and paste it in. The only thing you might need to change is your date, and then do a quick review. If that looks good, go ahead and release. Or again, if you got a schedule that's running that, that would take care of the release for you. Okay. We also, so that's the copy function, again, available here in the general ledger, as well as AP, AR, inventory, throughout, transaction screens throughout the system. Okay. Now, the other thing that I can do with transactions that are going to, I guess, occur on a more common basis, I can actually create a template out of it, right? So again, I got to find the transaction that I've previously created as a base, and I can come in here and I can say save as template. Now, when I say save as template, it opens up this document template screen where we can modify some of the values that are going to default in there. I'm not going to get that complex today to show you how to do that. I'm just going to simply move forward with giving my template a description. So I'm just going to call this rent accrual, and I'm going to save that. Okay. So now, because I have this template saved, what that means is, let me just go ahead and refresh the screen that I have open so it picks up that change. What that means is the next time I want to go create a rent accrual transaction, all I can do is hit the plus button, and I come up to my clipboard. You'll notice here I have this new item under my little clipboard menu called paste from, and then it gives me my template name, which is the rent accrual. I just grab that, and it will populate my screen for me, my entry for me. Okay. So having the template, once you set it up, right, you don't have to go out and find a previous transaction that you want to copy. So again, this might be a better method for those transactions that you kind of want to create templates out so that you can reuse them. Now, when you have a template or a copy, if anything changes, you certainly do have the flexibility to go in, change the dollar amount for this particular transaction if you want to. All right, I'm going to go ahead. I'm not balanced now. Change that to 900. I'm going to save and release that. Okay, so what I want to show you next is actually uploading the entry. So I can upload all my distribution details if I want to from an Excel file. So I'm going to go ahead and give my entry a description. Okay, and I'm going to hit this little button with this arrow pointing upward, which is going to prompt me to go find the file that I want to upload. Now, before I do that, I'm going to show you my file so you can see how I have it prepared. I'm going to drag that over. Okay. So in my file, I have specified the branch that I want to record this under, the accounts I'm using. Description is not necessary. I have it in there, but that's not necessary. My sub-accounts, my debit and credit, and if I wanted to enter a line distribution description, I could. Okay, so I just got some real basic information in here. So what I'm going to do now with this file is I'm going to go and I'm going to browse out to where this file is saved. I have a folder on my desktop that it's defaulting to. This is the name of the file. I'm going to say open, upload, click OK. Here's where it's mapping the columns in my file to the columns in Acumatica. Now, if you name the columns in your file exactly the same as the columns here in Acumatica, it will do the mapping for you automatically. So I'm going to click OK. And now I have my entry here. So if you want to maintain your entries in Excel, start uploading them at the end of the month or whenever, you certainly could do that through this out-of-the-box tool here. And I can save that. I can run my edit list if I want, and go ahead and release if this is not on a schedule. Okay. Now, Acumatica does also allow you to set up recurring transactions. Right? So that's what I'm going to demonstrate to you next, is setting up a transaction that's just going to recur based on a frequency that I'm going to define here. So to set up a recurring transaction, again, these are really great for depreciation. Again, when your schedule doesn't really change, you can go ahead, and what you need to do is you need to start with creating a balance transaction. Now, I still had this entry on my clipboard, so I cheated, and I just copied that in. So I have my journal transaction that I'm going to use as the basis for my recurring. I have that entered, and I have it in a balance status. Now, over here on my financial workspace, I'm going to say show all. I'm going to come to this recurring transaction profile. And here's where I'm going to define the frequency that this transaction is going to recur. And I'm also going to tell it what transactions I want to recur. So within this this template or this profile that I am creating, I could actually insert multiple entries that I have created that are in that balance status that are going to recur every month under the same frequency. I don't have to set up a recurring transaction template / profile for every entry. So for those that recur on the same frequency, you can group them all together. So you might have a template here that you're creating, just calling it like, you know, month and recurring entries. And you can place all those entries that you created in here that recur every single month. Go ahead and save that. Here's where I'm going to say I want this to recur monthly, every 1 month. So you could do this for quarterly as well, where you could say every 3 months, or, you know, semi-annually every 6 months. But I'm going to do this every month, and I want that to go ahead, and I want it to, I guess I'll do today, just so that you can see. If I do the end of the month, it'll get filtered out. But I'll do the 28th here, that I want this to recur. Now down here in this batch list, here's where I'm going to go find those the journal entries that I want to include into this template that are going to recur on a monthly frequency. In Acumatica, you're going to see this word batch quite often. Don't let that fool you in thinking this is like a batch in your GP world. When you see batch number in Acumatica, that's actually the equivalent of a journal entry number in a system like Dynamics, as well as a lot of other ERPs. Right? So I'm going to go look for that batch / journal entry number. And I'm going to go to the very last one in the list here that I know I just created. Now, I'm going to pull that in, okay, and I'm going to save this. Now, a couple things happened here when I added that entry to this recurring transaction template. If I go back to my transaction that I created and I refresh this, the status of this changed. It's the status is scheduled. So this is a visual. If you're ever looking at these entries that are sitting out there that have a status of schedule, you'll know that that's the base transaction for that recurring template profile that we just set up. Okay. Now, the other thing that we're going to see is when I go into my processing screen to generate recurring transactions, okay, I should see my recurring transaction template in here. Okay, that is all queued up and it's ready for me to execute. Why? Because I said I wanted this to recur on the 28th of the month, and my execution date is set to that. So I can just come in here, click that, say run. Again, I can set this generate recurring transaction process. I can set this up on a schedule in itself, just like I showed you with the journal transactions for releasing, so that you don't even need to touch this. It will just automatically create those recurring entries for you when when it becomes time, without a user having to come in and trigger anything. Okay. So now if I go over to my journal transactions and I look at my inquiry, okay, here's my rent accrual that just generated for the month. So next month, right, on the 28th, another one would recur, and so on, especially if I have that schedule set up, that would happen automatically. These recurring transactions do get created in a balance status, so that you do have the opportunity to go ahead and review that before you release. You'll notice here, this is showing you the original transaction that it's linked to, so kind of that base transaction. There's an audit trail of what transaction that this got created off of. Okay, so that is how you can set up recurring transactions. Now, I want to give you a flavor of the Acumatica import scenario tool that we've been talking about in last week's session, and then George mentioned that again today. Now, an import scenario is equivalent to Integration Manager, or even if you were to buy Infinia, it can do the same thing as Infinia. Both of those products are add-on products to GP that you have to pay extra for. Okay? The import scenario tool comes out of the box with Acumatica. There's no additional fee for this. This tool is going to allow you to not just import transactions into the general ledger, right? Like Infinia, that's module based. You have a few specific screens across modules that you can import into, right? And they charge you per module. With Integration Manager, while you could import into transaction screens throughout the GP modules, it's still limited. It's not every single transaction screen. Here in Acumatica with the import tool, if you can put data into that screen, then you can create an import to automate that data and bring that in. All your master records, all your transactional screens, we can insert records, we can update records, we can even delete records through these import scenarios. So it's very, very powerful. So I wanted to just kind of give you a flavor of what it would look like for someone that wanted to use the import scenario tool to bring in a journal entry. So I have another entry that's already created. I called this my payroll entry. And I'm going to bring this over to the screen here. So imagine you're using ADP or some sort of external payroll system, and they're going ahead and they're giving you a file, right, of the payroll entry that's resulting from that payroll. So this is kind of what this is representing, is that payroll file that you would get. Now I'm going to come over to my financial workspace, and under scenarios, I have this journal entry upload that I created that I'm going to open up. Now, when a user wants to import some new data, all they need to do is take that file and just drag and drop it up here in the header. Okay. Notice my files up here went from 3 to 4. Now, what your users would typically do is they would hit prepare and import. What that does is it reads your file and it imports it in all at the same time. I want to kind of show you that in 2 separate steps to give you a better understanding of what the system's doing. So I'm going to prepare first, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import. So when I hit prepare, what just happened was Acumatica went out and it read that latest Excel file that was uploaded. And it refreshes the grid here with the data that's in that file. Now, note that this is very different than Integration Manager, where this grid is actually interactive. So if someone had a typo in the account number or the sub-account number, I actually have the ability to change that information here in the grid before I import. Now, if I import, again, I got the wrong account number, Acumatica is doing validation here when it's trying to bring this data in. And if it can't find that account number or that sub-account number, or if the entry doesn't balance as a whole, right, I'm going to get errors and the data is not going to come in. This is another example of when of why I would need to update some information here in this grid, and having this grid be interactive just saves me so much time, because I don't need to go back out to my original file, right, to make that change and then upload it again. Here in the grid, I can make whatever changes I need to, and I could just reprocess that file. System's smart enough to know if this is a multi-entry file, if some entries were successful, others weren't, it knows which ones it brought in, so that if I fix any data that has errors, it's only going to bring in the ones that failed. Right? So I hit prepare. Again, that refreshes the grid with all the data in my Excel file. Next thing I'm going to go do is I'm going to hit import. You got this little timer. It was so quick, it didn't even take a second to bring in. And you'll get a little green checkbox once that's done. So this is another thing, another key difference between Microsoft Dynamics GP and Acumatica is that the speed that these imports run at are so much quicker than what you're seeing with Integration Manager. There is some parallel processing that we can turn on if these are really large files where it's actually bringing in multiple transactions all at the same time. Again, that's something else that your Integration Manager does not have. Okay. So now if I go back over to my journal transaction screen, now that I imported that payroll entry, here's where you can see I have this balance entry now that I can open up. Again, it's balanced. I have the ability to edit it. I can release it, release in mass through that processing screen, or have a schedule set up to release. Okay. All right. One thing I wanted to mention, since I have my payroll entry opened up, is you're going to notice that the offset, right, to my payroll entry is a cash account. In GP, that is a big no-no, right, to do journal entries to cash if you're using GP's bank reconciliation. The reason for that is that the general ledger and the cash module inside of GP, it is not bidirectional. So if I do a journal entry to cash in GP, I will not see that cash entry in my bank reconciliation to be able to reconcile that. Acumatica is bidirectional when it comes to the general ledger and your cash module. So if you want to do journal entries directly to your cash account, you will see this in your checkbook register, right? If I was to go over to cash module, if I wanted to reconcile right now, I'm going to see this entry again in my bank ledger for me to reconcile. So that's a big difference, because we see people, like, instead of going to cash and GP, they're going to a clearing account, and then they're having to use a bank transaction to kind of clear that over and move that into cash. So another benefit. All right, I am going to just quickly take you through what a journal voucher is. Okay, so a journal voucher is a great tool that will allow accountants to put in some entries, like an invoice to a customer. Maybe they're doing some sort of reconciliation and they need to invoice the customer for something at the end of the month, or they need to put in a bill for a vendor, but you don't want to give them access to AP and AR to actually go put those transactions in for control purpose reasons. Through this journal voucher screen, I can actually create an AP bill right from here, which I will demonstrate for you. So again, I got my date, my branch, I can put a description. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pick a code. So I'm going to say I want to put in an AP bill. Okay, I'm going to go pick my vendor, which I'll pick the very first one, AA customer. And then the default debit and sub account, these are the default expense accounts for this vendor if you have that specified. Otherwise, you'll pop that in, and it already knows what my AP account is, my credit account. Put in my voucher number, and then I can go ahead, remove this, and release if I have security to do so. So once this releases, if I go over to my payables module and I open up my bills and adjustments, here's where you're going to see there's this new bill that's sitting up here, where again, an accountant was able to enter without having typical full access to accounts payable to do so. So again, you can do the same thing on the receivable side with an invoice. So just wanted to give you a little flavor of that. That's something that GP doesn't have. And I think it's a nice to have at certain times. All right, reclassifications. So there's some really cool function around reclassifications here. A couple different ways you can go about doing that. I'm going to type in reclass. So there is this reclassify transaction screen where when I hit the load button, I am able to either specify an account or arrange accounts that I want to load here into the screen. I also control the sub-accounts that I want to bring in as well. And I can go ahead and I can quickly reclassify balances in those accounts for those transactions right here through this screen. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pull up my rent account because I know I've got some transactions that we've released to rent for this period. And I'm going to say, go ahead and load. Okay. So for the period of September, I did not put any restrictions on my sub-account, so it brought in all the transactions that hit 6290 for all the different sub-accounts here. Okay. If I had a data entry error where maybe I booked, too much here to my ops account, I could quickly come over here and I could pick a different sub-account. Maybe this goes to the warehouse. Okay. Notice when I make a change to the sub-account, I could even change the account was booked to. This little checkbox gets enabled. When I hit process, this is actually going to create a journal entry for me and it's going to reclassify those dollars really from one sub-account to the others, which is what I did there. I could go directly to a different GL account if I wanted to. Maybe someone actually posted, you know, this amount to rent expense and it really belonged to my repairs. I can pick that repairs account and I can process. And every time I make that reclassification change, that is going in and it's actually creating a journal transaction for me doing that reclass. Again, they're in a bound state. They're not automatically released. Okay. So here's where I can kind of see the reclassification, in this case, from one sub-account to the next. And it's showing me the original entry that caused that reclassification. Okay. So that's, I think, some pretty cool functionality. Another way you can reclass is directly from your account details inquiry. So maybe I am reconciling an account, right? I'll pull up my rent account. Again, I know I got transactions there for this month. So maybe here I am, again, I'm going through accounts, doing some reconciliations. I find something that was posted incorrectly, okay? I have some options here right from this inquiry screen that I'm working on. I can select whatever entries I want to reclass, and I can hit reclassify. Or maybe I am just totally reclassing everything from this account out to somewhere else. I could hit a reclassify all, and it would bring all those entries into this next screen. I'm just going to pick the one just to keep it simple. I'm going to hit reclassify. It's going to bring me into that reclassify transaction screen that we were just in, but it's going to have the data already loaded with the transactions that I selected in that previous screen. And then from here, I can go ahead and I can make my changes. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit different functionality here. I'm going to show you this split functionality. So what I can do is if I want to split this dollar amount from this account into another account, I could certainly do so. So again, maybe everything was booked to finance. I want to book a portion of this to my support and operations. So I can say, how much do I want to split? I'll say I want to put 150 here. You can see it automatically reduces that original amount to 350. So I go ahead, I say process, and that creates that reclassification entry for me over here under my journal transactions. You can see that. Okay, so just a little bit more functionality there and another way of going about kind of loading that reclassification screen. Okay. All right, let's look at some reports here. I'm going to bring you over to the trial balance. So we have two different trial balance reports here in Acumatica. We have a summary report. What the summary report trial balance is it is rolling up all your activity up to that main or natural account number. So it's not going to show you balances down at a sub-account level when you run the summary level. We'll go ahead and just hit run to run the report. And here's where you're seeing I'm looking at a trial balance here now by just your main account. Now I know in GP, it's showing you the full account string, which again, if you got a lot of different sub-accounts, this trial balance report is going to be pages and pages and pages, unless you use Management Reporter, right, to go ahead and build out a trial balance. Again, from within these reports, you could always have drilling capability wherever you see that blue and the underline. So if I want to go ahead and let's see, this one's got some activity here, click on the account. Okay, it's going to bring me to that account details screen, the one we were just in, where I went into my reclassifications. Okay, where it's showing me all the transactions that are making that balance for that period of September of 2021. Okay. From here, I also can drill into the actual journal entry numbers if I wanted to. So here's my journal entry number, and now I am here at my journal transaction. Couple new things I want to point out on a journal entry here in Acumatica. If this entry is resulting from a subledger transaction, meaning it came from our cash module, our inventory, purchasing, accounts receivable, right? You'll notice the module changes depending on where it originated from. So if this was an entry that originated just in the general ledger, it would have GL. Otherwise, it's telling you the module it came from. And if This module is set anything to anything besides GL for general ledger. I can go ahead and hit view source document, and that's going to open up the originating transaction for me to review. One other thing I want to mention for those of you that are using inventory, when you are posting your inventory transactions and it's creating journal entries here, Acumatica does also include the inventory ID, which is kind of a big thing. A lot of times people are like, what created this what created this inventory transaction? So you can actually see either what was purchased, what was sold, or any kind of adjustments that you made to inventory. Same thing here on the customer side. If this was an entry that resulted from like an AR invoice, you would see the customer that that invoice was tied to, or if it was an AP bill, you would see the vendor. So in GP, you can see that information if you are in a smart list, but from the journal transaction itself, you don't have visibility. So we find that this is super helpful. Customers really love that visibility to that information right from within the transaction itself. All right. Just really quickly on budgets, because our time is just flying by here. I'm going to go over to my favorites, and I want to go to my budget configuration. So in Acumatica, before you actually go ahead and populate your budget, you can, in this budget configuration screen, create kind of like a tree-like view where you're breaking out all the accounts that you want to budget into these nodes here. Okay. Now the benefit of creating these different nodes with the accounts in it is when you do actually get to the budget screen, you can export out the accounts from within that node, and you could give it to the applicable individuals that are responsible for budgeting for those accounts. So I think about organizations where when we're talking about expenses, they are budgeting down to a departmental level. So you can create departmental nodes for your expenses that would include all the expense accounts just for a specific department. And from that budget, you could just export out those accounts for that node, give it to the person who's responsible for budgeting for that department. Okay. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time because we only have about 15 minutes left. We still got a bit to cover. But here I just want to point out you can kind of create this tree with these different nodes in it where you can specify which accounts fall in each node. What happens next is when you actually get over to your budget, here's where when you're building your budget, you're going to specify your ledger. Acumatica does allow you to have multiple budget ledgers. Let's say you want to be able to play around and do some forecasting. You can create a ledger specifically for that forecasting, where it would allow you to pull any of these budget ledgers into your financial reports, so you kind of use that data and compare it against your actuals. In this example, I just have the one ledger, just our annual budget. You have a year, right, that you are preparing the budget for. And here's a budget that I already have created for my 2021 year. Now you're going to notice when I first come into here, I'm seeing my budget at kind of like a high level, summary level, at, based on those nodes that I created. Here's where I'm seeing kind of the total amount, the amount that was distributed across to all the periods. So typically you want your distributed amount and your amount to be the same if it's all been distributed across. But now I can click into my nodes, and here's where I'm able to see each of those accounts and the amount that I have budgeted for at an account and sub-account level. So when you first build this out, right, you're not going to have any dollar amounts in here typically, unless you're basing your budget on, let's say, a previous year where you want to take those values and maybe do a, mark it up a little bit type of a thing, which is not how people typically go ahead and budget. Usually this is blank, and then what you would do is you would hit export, you'd export this out, these accounts would then get handed off in that Excel file to the individual that's responsible for budgeting for your sales accounts. Same thing for in this example of your purchasing expenses and your operating expenses. Once those Excel templates were filled out, again, I've got my little Excel button that would just download this all to Excel. Once they've populated that, I can use my upload button to go ahead and bring that data back here into my budget. And from there, I can go ahead and I can use this budget information in our financial reports, which is where we're heading next. So I'm going to go to my favorites because I have some of these tagged here. I'm going to start off with my profit and loss versus year-to-date budget report. And I'm going to run this. I've saved this report as a template for January just because I know I've got quite a bit of data in the sales demo environment in the month of January, not too much current here. So I saved this as a template. So again, this is some nice functionality with any of the reports inside of Acumatica where you can save, you know, the parameters that you are running the report by. Even some of the print and email settings, you can save those as templates so that you could call those up. If I had multiple templates, when I hit this drop down, I could pick which one I want to call that back up quickly with the settings that I kind of have memorized or predefined. Other thing that you can do when you're using these reports with templates is you can schedule them. So if you want to send out reports on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, whatever to people, you could schedule those and have those automatically get emailed to people. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to run this report. Okay, where we're seeing all of our year-to-date values, okay, our budgeted values, and then kind of our variance where we're at from a budgeting perspective here. Okay, looks like we're doing good. I don't know how this demo data is set up, but we are right on target here with our budget. Now, on these financial reports, you can go ahead and drill in. Again, it's going to bring you to some reports where this is going to show me all the details of the account combination that's making up that balance. And from here, I can drill down even to another level back into my account details inquiry where I'm seeing all the transactions. And if I wanted to, I can go ahead and I can open up any of those transactions. So you can see the power of all this drill back functionality. The other thing, if you didn't notice, was how quick this report ran, right? In GP, you're using probably Management Reporter, not FRX at this point in time, right? But when you go and you run a Management Reporter report, they don't populate this quick, right? You sit there sometimes, depending on the level of detail and the amount of data you're bringing into that report. I mean, you can go have yourself a nice coffee break before that report actually generates. Acumatica is using their own financial report writer. We are not using an external application like GP is with Management Reporter. Management Reporter, for those of you who don't know, is actually a separate database. So there's a synchronization process that occurs between GP and Management Reporter, synchronize those transactions back and forth, which is part of the reason why sometimes you do have some performance issues there. Sometimes even your data gets out of sync, right? And someone's got to kind of rebuild your data mart. You don't have any of those challenges here in Acumatica because there is not two separate databases. This report writer is pulling from the same database that your data originates from, which is why it's so quick and it's 100% accurate all the time. All right. I do want to show you an example of a report, this product line report, where we are utilizing our product line sub-account here in this report, and we are displaying that in columns here. So this is a P&L report, again, where we're looking at all of our sales and expense data, but it's broken out by the different product lines with some totals here at the end. All right, so just to give you a flavor of what we can do with that sub-account string. Now, another thing that we can do, I'm going to go over to a rolling 12 months. So this is a rolling 12 months where I'm looking at all of my P&L activity for the past 12 months. But I want to show you this little grouping button. This little grouping button is actually running off of a unit set, which is comparable to like a tree inside of Management Reporter, where within that tree, it's going to allow me to slice and dice this financial information by basically any segmentation that I have in my sub-account string or my company branch structure. So this tree that I'm going to show you is actually running off of the company branch structure, where I'm going to slice this basically consolidated report of all my companies, all my branches. I'm going to slice that now by my product company, where it's showing me my financial report just for transactions that were booked in the product company. Now I'm going to slice it to look at, well, what happened on the retail side of that product business versus the wholesale side. So again, you're seeing the power of having that unit set functionality here built into Acumatica. You can see how quickly that these reports just refresh. Again, all of these values you can drill into down to the actual originating transaction. You can easily email these reports to anybody, print them. You can export it out to a PDF or Excel. Lots of flexibility there. I'm not going to take you through how the reports are actually constructed. I'm just going to say that they are built really on the same concept as Management Reporter, where you've got your rows, your column, and your tree. And you can go ahead and you can mix and marry those together however you need to construct a report like this that you're looking at.
Hey, Stacey, one thing I'd like to add to is that, again, that rows, columns, trees, in this case, unit sets, all of those are very much the same. I know we're limited on time. I also wanted to indicate that the flexibility in terms of changing account numbers. You know, in Great Plains, you know, if you want to change the account number, you have got to buy another tool add-on called Changer. With Acumatica, whether it be a GL code, a vendor code, a customer, I mean, you literally can change the ID on the fly. I don't know if you want to just show a simple example of that.
So on my screen, you're seeing I'm in my chart of accounts here. This account currently is 12,450. I want to change this to 12,500. It's as simple as this. It's going to ask me if I want to change the key. I say yes. And what it does is it goes back throughout the entire system. And wherever there are transactions or configurations or anything that references that 12,450, it just automatically updated that to 12,500. All right, so I'm going to come over into our banking module. One thing that we have here inside of Acumatica are what are called entry types. Entry types are kind of like codes that you predefine that are used in conjunction with a banking transaction. That's going to control which accounts are being used when you're putting a transaction in of that type or of that code, right? So this helps, again, provide controls around the accounts that are being used when you put in specific bank transactions. It allows you to run some reporting on bank transactions where you're looking at transactions of a certain type. These types can also come into play with the bank feed module, which we're not going to really have any time to look at today, but basically the bank feed module is connected to your bank. It actually can connect to 14,000 different banks here in the US, where it is pulling transactions from your bank statement down into Acumatica based on whatever frequency we define. In a lot of cases, we run it daily, like at night, where it's going to pull in all new activity that occurred at your bank into the bank reconciliation module. Now, if it finds a match for those transactions in Acumatica, it's going to mark them as cleared. If it doesn't find the transactions, you have some options, right? You can take that transaction from the bank. There's a screen where it shows you the transaction itself, and you could actually create the transaction here in Acumatica. When you do that, you can use these entry types to, again, control the accounting for those transactions that are getting created. So that's another area where those entry types come into play. Another thing about those transactions, if it doesn't find it already in Acumatica, you can actually define rules around some of these transactions where if they recur every single month, maybe you got some automatic withdrawals that you're not running through payables, or bank fees, things like that, that occur every single month. If we can build some rules around that, when those transactions come in from your bank, instead of sitting there waiting for you to create the transaction, the system can create those transactions for you automatically. So all that is done through this module called Bank Feeds. So just a little bit of information on that. If you'd like to learn more, I can certainly give you a demo of that. So here we have our entry types, back to entry types. When I go into a bank transaction here, I'm going to hit the start button. I'm going to pick the cash account that I want to create the transaction for, and then I'm going to pick the entry type that's applicable to this transaction that I'm creating here. Right. Now I'm going to pick this entry type called unknown customer deposit, because this is going to lead into actually the next area of the banking module that I want to demonstrate to you. So the thought process behind this entry type is you see something hitting your bank statement, a deposit, and it's most likely an ACH from one of your customers, but that information at a bank level, right, it doesn't tell you who the customer is, and you want to make sure that you can get this receipt posted to your cash module right away so that your cash is up to date. So I've got this entry type called unknown customer deposit here that I'm using. This document reference number, this could be a check number, it could be your ACH, transaction number. So I'm just going to pop something in there. And here's where I'm going to say how much this unknown customer deposit is. I'll just say it was for $1,000. It's going to be sitting in this liability account called customer unknown deposits. That's going to be the offset to cash. And I'm going to remove my hold and release it. Okay. So again, just this, so you can kind of relate this transaction screen. This can be used for your bank deposits. You have automatic withdrawals, maybe insurance withdrawals coming out, right? You could use this screen and have those different entry types with those GL accounts already coded to those. Now, because Acumatica's GL and cash modules are bidirectional, you certainly could do a lot of those as journal entries if you have access to the general ledger. Where we see people really utilizing all these entry types and putting in banking transactions is if the individual who is responsible for maintaining your checkbook register, right, doesn't have access to the general ledger. That's where we see them using these types of transactions more so than a journal entry that would be bidirectional. All right, so going back to this scenario, customer deposit, right? So I've got this balance sitting in here, customer deposits, and I'm going to do some research on it. Might be the same day, maybe tomorrow, maybe a week from now, I finally figure out who this deposit actually belongs to. So in the banking module, I have the ability to reclassify my payments here. So under this screen, I can restrict my cash account. So if I have multiple cash accounts where I would have unknown deposits, I could use that as a filter if I want. Okay, but here's that deposit that I just created, right? And what I'm going to do now is over here under the customer ID, I'm actually going to go in, I'm going to assign the customer that this deposit belongs to. So I'm going to say it's this U.S. bartending school, and I'm going to go ahead and process that. So what happens is this now moves the dollars from my 2200 account and it offsets accounts receivable. Now, if I go up to my accounts receivable module and I go to my payments and applications, here's where I can see this payment that was just created. It's on hold. Again, someone's got to review and accept this. But here's where this on hold payment now lives for this customer after it's been reclassified. So I think that's pretty cool. GP doesn't have anything like that. And I've found from working with GP clients in the past that, you're sitting there with these unknown payments for a week, sometimes a few weeks, just trying to figure out who they belong to. And now your cash isn't up to date. So Acumatica just offers that pretty cool flexibility there. Just want you to know, as far as reconciliations go in the banking, it has everything that you would expect through a bank reconciliation, everything that GP has, and then even more with the ease and flexibility of being able to create kind of missing transactions from that reconciliation screen. Thank you, everybody.
There is one question from Sandra, is there a workflow available for journal entry approvals? Right
Yes.
now, to attach, a document in GP, you have to attach it by journal entry. Can you attach it by batch?
You can set up approvals here on your journal entries. As far as file attachments, you can attach a file, right here. Okay, you can upload your backup documentation for this entry through the files. Okay, you also can do it at a line level. So if you had any sort of file attachments that you wanted to put at a line level, you have flexibility to do that there as well.
So
Any feedback from from the Cal client side? When they this session was really focused on general ledger. And the next session, which will be next Tuesday, will gear towards more like payables and receivables. But any thoughts on what you're seeing?
This is James. Yeah, George, it's you can really see how much more efficient it is as a system. Going through it and kind of in my head comparing with GP and what we do, just a simple reclass entry, that is, so much easier in Acumatica. And of course, Stacey mentioned the banking transactions. We're constantly fighting that battle between, something's a banking transaction and booking it through the, through the bank module. That comes up all the time. So it's certainly a different look and feel, but it's certainly a more efficient system. And if you had a big accounting staff, you would save a lot of time.
Yeah, no, thank you, James, for the that comment. I mean, and it goes way beyond what we can show you in an hour and a half here. I mean, the business alerts and the the ability that we can build this automated workflows into things, look for certain conditions, forward alerts to a person's dashboard, a controller dashboard. We talked about in the last session tasks, where again, if you have a staff and you just want to assign somebody a certain thing to do, I mean, typically you're going to send them an email, but in Acumatica we can set that up as a task, and if everybody's homepage or dashboard has my tasks on it, and we can even put reminders on those, so you can really connect at a very different level to your team. And as I say, I mean, I use our P&L. I mean, all every other day I look at our P&L, and it runs just as fast as Stacey's showing, and we got 4 years of history in there. I can drill down the things if I need to. Access to the to reports that show balances in the bank. Reports that connect instantly to AP. And then the dashboards, like I say, can be customized beyond the ones that you're seeing right out of the box, like for controller. There could be accounts. There's a default one for accounts receivable, default one for the payables. So yeah, just thank you for that. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I want to thank everybody, and we'll look forward to seeing you. Hopefully, for the final session here for the Lunch and Learns on GP versus Acumatica.